Welcome to this episode of the Tower of London Virtual Tour mini-series. This episode is focusing on the story of Anne Boleyn at the Tower of London. She's one of the most famous prisoners here, also obviously being executed here in May 1536. My name is Philippa Brule from British History Tours, and I'm going to be your virtual guide today and take you around the Tower of London. I'm going to take you around some of the places that are linked to Anne's story here in May 1536. This is the month where she was arrested. She was brought here as a prisoner and she was executed for high treason. Anne was brought here on the 2nd of May 1536. She did not come in through Traitor's Gate, as many would have you believe. She came in through the river entrance in a similar position to what we're looking at now, into a gate in the Bywood Tower. And from the inside of the tower, this is interesting because people walk past this. This is where, if you're a visitor to the tower, you would come in and this would be on your right just before you go and get an audio guide. So many look at Traitor's Gate, but that is not where Anne came in. But you don't have to go into the tower to see the gate that Anne went through. If you're on the bank, on the river side of the tower, then you can see this side of the gate she went through from there. On the 2nd of May, Anne was arrested at Greenwich Palace, which is further on down the Thames, and brought here by river barge. She was taken to her private apartments, the same apartments she had been in almost 3 years earlier, on the night before her coronation. So she wasn't kept in a prison cell at the tower, she was in the royal apartments there. Sometimes people have heard that Anne was kept in apartments, so looked over here to these half-timbered Tudor buildings and assumed that that is where she was kept. But no, these buildings weren't actually built at the time of Anne's incarceration at the tower. The apartments that Anne was kept in were in this area that I'm showing you here. They no longer exist. They were destroyed in the 18th century, along with the Great Hall where Anne had her trial. The Great Hall is around about the area that the ravens are now kept in at the tower. Now, this artist impression that you can see if you walk along the curtain wall of the tower shows you the royal palace now lost, so you can get an idea of where these buildings were. At dawn on the morning of the 19th of May 1536, Anne heard mass in her chambers. At 8 o'clock, the constable of the tower, Sir William Kingston, came and got Anne ready for her execution. While we were at the tower on the 19th of May 2018, I did a recording while we were there live to show everyone the route the route we think Anne took from her apartments to her site of execution. And so let me share that with you now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Philippa from British History Tours here. We are on it's the final day tomorrow of the Anne Boleyn experience. So we are here at the Tower of London today, 19th of May, to commemorate the execution of Anne Boleyn. What I want to do is talk to you about where Anne would have been and her procession route to the scaffold. So I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm stood on the curtain wall at Tower of London, so now we're looking over towards the White Tower. You have the Armouries building, or the barracks behind there. And if you can see in the middle the remains of a tower, and the royal complex, if you like, was between that tower and the curtain wall here. And Anne Boleyn would have been within the Queen's apartments in there, we think. And if you can see down there where all the archways are, if you imagine there would have been the Great Hall or the King's Hall. That's where her trial had been. So that would have been linked, if you imagine the Great Hall here and then a set of apartments in this area here. She came out of her apartments through the Great Hall and up through Cold Harbour Gate, which this just remains of now. Walked up the western side of the White Tower, and the scaffold from records, they think the scaffold was between the White Tower and that building that I call the Armouries building or the barracks. Just move out of people's way here. On the opposite side of the White Tower to where I am now. Just wanted to show you the procession route. It's quite a long procession route. You know, we're on the south side of the tower. She was made to walk through the apartments, through the Great Hall or King's Hall, up through the Cold Harbour Gate on the western side of the White Tower, and then around to the northern side of the tower.
If you visited the tower or you've seen pictures, you will probably have seen this glass pillow memorial. Now, this is not the site of scaffold, as we've just seen, but what is interesting, and I thought you might like, is I have found this out of a tour guide for the Tower of London from 1973, and you can quite clearly see that around the point where the glass pillow memorial now is, it actually says site of block. Anne had understandably been hysterical at times during her incarceration in the Tower of London, but on the day of her execution, she was calm and collected and made this speech. Good Christian people, I have not come here to preach a sermon. I have come here to die. For according to the law and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak of what whereof I am accused, and condemned to die. But I pray God save the King, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never. And to me he was ever a good, a gentle, and sovereign lord. And if any person will meddle of my cause, I require them to judge the best. And thus I take my leave of the world and of you all, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me. Anne's body was taken to St Peter ad Vincula and buried without ceremony inside the chapel, and perhaps people didn't actually think this was going to actually happen because there was no coffin prepared for her. Her body and severed head were placed inside a box which had been used to store bows. The grave markings that you see today within the chapel are actually 18th century. The chapel was found to be rather unsafe underfoot, and Queen Victoria visited here because this is actually a chapel royal. This is a chapel that belongs to the reigning monarch, and Victoria said, "This is ridiculous, we need to get this sorted." They probably weren't her words. And the bodies were exhumed and reinterred, and these paving stones now, which look very beautiful, were laid. So if you visit the Tower of London to pay your respects to Anne, there's absolutely no issue with going to the Glass Memorial to pay your respects. It's not the actual site of the scaffold, that's the only sort of myth around it that we need to dispel. And if you're interested in some more myth dispelling at the Tower of London about Anne Boleyn, I have another video with Claire Ridgway. When we were there on tour last year, 2019, we did a myth busting video around the Tower of London, really fun, so please catch that. I hope you've enjoyed this virtual tour of the Tower of London, this one in the mini-series focusing on Anne Boleyn. Take care, I'll see you next time.